Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about art and formal analysis. Now, if you're not familiar with the Online Writing Center, we work with students at all stages of the writing process, including through answering questions via email, providing resources such as templates to help speed up the formatting process, as well as offering webinars such as this and one-on-one appointments you can sign up for. The appointments come in two basic flavors, real-time and asynchronous, or not real-time. For an asynchronous appointment, you sign up for a specific time on the calendar. By the time that appointment rolls around, you upload a copy of your current draft and any special requests, a link to the assignment description and a few other details, and then we look at that and send you feedback, generally within 24 hours via email. If you're submitting on a Sunday or a Monday, we make sure to get you the feedback by Monday early afternoon so you have the time to actually respond to it and integrate that feedback. But the general cycle is less than 24 hours and a little bit faster if it is right before the paper is due, or a day or so before it's due. For a real-time appointment, you get to pick between a phone appointment or a Zoom appointment. So it's really a question of whether you want to see the screen being shared or not. Some people find it easier to have a discussion about things and be able to picture in their mind's eye, and other people prefer to see it right in front of them. And that's really a case-by-case thing. You can switch back and forth. You're not bound to do one thing all the time. So if you are more of a visual learner and you'd benefit, you think, from being able to see things being tweaked, especially if you're asking questions about how to format things, then I would recommend a Zoom appointment. If you're, say, a passenger riding through rush hour traffic and you just have more general questions about things, you might prefer a phone. At any rate, we have many of these resources accessible directly through the Online Writing Center website 24/7. But if you're signing up for an appointment, you'll want to go to my.acu.edu and under Resources, select Online Writing Center, and then just follow the instructions from there. If you are looking for undergraduate course-related webinars, you can find those separated by course or under this undergraduate tab, in which case they're alphabetically by program and then numerically within a program. You'll see me referring to an APA course paper template later that you can download through this link. You can also watch our videos through our YouTube channel or follow our blog to find write-ups and discussions of various topics of interest. So our learning objectives today, we're going to start with talking about the elements and principles of formal analysis. Then we'll look at a specific assignment that requires doing this, and we'll finish with a discussion of how to go from the instructions to outlining and drafting. So if we look at the elements and principles of formal analysis, we have a list that the Kennedy Center website has that is a great place to start. So if we look at the key elements, we might include line to talk about what shapes are created or traced out, sometimes explicitly, sometimes forming this without there being, say, a black line showing this exact shape. And ask, where is the eye drawn, or what shapes do we sense, even if it's less explicit in the subject. Might look at values like, okay, how is dark and light balanced and contrast in this? Is it a nighttime scene, in which case it's probably going to be darker? Is it something that's more ominous? Again, same thing. Is it something where we have a transition between dark and light? And look at the shapes that are traced out in 2 dimensions, which may be different from the forms that step out to us that appear rendered in some way in 3 dimensions. Same thing, how is color used or erased? Is there a predominant color? What are the textures that we see? So these are more individual elements. But if we could also apply them on a broader scale, as well as look at the larger organizing principles. Okay, what is the balance at play here? What is the contrast that we see? Is there a sense of movement as how something is placed in a frame, or do we see people who are running or doing other actions? Is there an emphasis, something that stands out? Do we have patterns that we see? Are there proportions? For example, there's the concept of the golden mean. Is that represented here in where things are placed or how much they fill the frame? Is there a sense of unity? Now, there are other elements and principles for formal analysis that different methods of breaking down may mention. These are illustrative examples, a starting point for organizing your thoughts when you're looking at a piece of art. We could also look at the guidelines laid out by the Getty Center, a museum in Los Angeles, and see what they present for formal analysis, including explanations. Let's go ahead and open up that. Now, if you are writing a specific assignment that requires formal analysis, they may have a checklist that they want you to follow or a process here. But the great thing about resources like this is they give you different ways of understanding the principles, different explanations, in this case with visual art examples. So let's take a look at this, A Calm at a Mediterranean Port. And if we look at this painting here, and this is something drawn from the Getty collection, we see, okay, so if we picked any one of those elements, in this case, let's say that we are looking at the sense of movement here. So we have a ship on the right. The ship is moving. It's on the right-hand side. It appears to be going out of frame, off into the distance, and the sense is reinforced by we see not one but two ships with sails in the distance besides that, as well as it looks like some smaller boat or tender, and another boat that's getting ready to go, and so these are all moving in that direction. We also have the birds flying, and we see the sun setting in the distance. So this gives the sense of space. In fact, even though there's that tall lighthouse, if we move towards the ship here, we have this tall thing moving down to the shorter masts, and so we have the sense of parallax of lines moving towards that point. Same thing with the lines for those steps of stone there. That all gives a sense of convergence, motion. And you'll see that there's some discussion on the side here about the elements of this, talking about the use of color, the things that are standing out amongst this, these darker things here. I'll say as an example here, we have this woman here. Her skin is illuminated in a sense that many of the other figures aren't. Same here. And so that makes these details stand out. And if we look in the detail, in the distance, we can see the outline of this building with a dome, this one here, and even as you start looking, you start spotting other things that, despite being in the dark areas, are illuminated to stand out. So here we have this mast here and the cross brace there. And we have these look like statues here. So there are lots of details here that don't appear at the first light, but align with different principles and reinforce the sense overall of how formal layouts, formal design has been used to give certain effects. And so one of those effects that we have here, I mentioned parallax earlier, where we have the lines converging. There's a very strong sense of the visual focus being on this sunset here, which is natural. I like to look at sunsets an awful lot. And so you have this ship here that's sailing off into the sunset. And you can look at other details and see, okay, what flag is that? It looks like red, white, and blue. Blue looks like it's turned a little green. But if you're looking at this in person, check and make sure, because the difference between, say, the French tricolor and the Italian and tricolor flags is about those little color differences. But if you're looking in person, you can see many more details. Now, it happens that the Getty website lets us zoom in on some of these things, and you can examine some details of the technique or things that are just hard to see. So for example, we have this pattern, this tracing on the net, on the fisherman's net that he's pulling up. And you just don't see that when you're looking at something quickly or looking at it zoomed out. So when you have a painting in front of you, look for these details. If you're writing about it, make notes on the observations, the things that step out to you, and how do they work. And here, you could even see these little weights here that will help hold the edges down. Look here, we see some fish. Cannons. Now that is suggestive, because those aren't tiny cannons. Those, I would guess, are supposed to be 24-pound cannons, so, cannons for a large warship. And, there's someone just here sitting on them. What does that mean? I don't know what you will think after you've looked at this for a while. There are probably other details that will stand out to you. But for me, that gives a little bit of a sense of setting of, okay, well, this may be, a fisherman scene, but clearly there's some other stuff going on here, because you don't just have those cannons lying around for nothing. Look at this. Okay, this is actually a 2-deck vessel. We would call this in the parlance of the time, this would be a ship of the line, because we have the 2 gun decks, I believe. So, now, in that context, we look at it and say, okay, so are these sailors? Are these soldiers? I don't know. Yeah, you'll find other details when you are looking, but the title here is A Calm at a Mediterranean Port. And if we look at the time here, 1770, that's interesting, because we have a period, this is painted when they're not actively at war with anyone, but still interesting. Some things to think about. So let's now go and look at a specific assignment. So this is ARTO 221's Week 4 assignment, the formal analysis paper. So this is coming from the Art History General Survey 1 course. And this is a somewhat longer assignment description, but we can make sense of this. So if we look at this, we have the purpose to analyze the formal characteristics of an artwork as it relates to the work's expression, message, or meaning. Okay, so that's not just looking at it and saying, okay, here are these things, and how does this enhance what the painting conveys? And so there's an excellent video for this assignment from the instructor that I absolutely recommend watching if you're doing this specific assignment. Let's look at the details here. Select a single work of art, which could include a building, that you can view and analyze in person. As nice as the zoom is on the Getty website, there's a lot of details that you'll only see staring at that painting. And many works of art are very, very large, and so you can spend far more than the hour and a half here looking at it, finding more details. Some of these paintings took months or years to complete, and so there's a lot that's embedded there, and a lot that is not immediately obvious, and that you'll only see when you're looking at it closer, when you step back. So we look at the requirements here, and we say, okay, needs to be a formal analysis of something that's a constructed object, so we're not reviewing, say, an arch in Yosemite, that has been created with a stable meaning, and has a meaning that can be ascertained by studying the relationship between the elements of the work. You should think as if you were describing a work of art to an intelligent person who has never seen it before. When your reader finishes reading your analysis, they should have a mental picture of what the work looks like. Please provide a photograph of the work on the last page of your formal analysis. And it's more than just a description of the work. You should also have a thesis statement that reflects your conclusions about the work. For example, what do you think the meaning is, or what's the message that it sends to the viewer? What is this work all about? And this is something where your thoughts might be guided just by looking at it. It might be guided by the description with things you know about the author. Now, you want your analysis to be grounded in what you see, but here's an example of some details that may guide your analysis. So we're looking now at a painting called Almond Blossom, painted by Vincent van Gogh. It happens that it was painted while he was in a mental asylum. He was having some mental health issues. But he painted this canvas as a wedding gift for his brother and his new sister-in-law. And so having a painting that's set in the spring, Almond Blossom, that is, I would say, about new life, new beginnings, because the blossoms leading to fruit and everything, that's something that may shape how you view these details, how you interpret them and their significance. Now, is that going to be the bulk of your analysis? Oh, no. But it's something where titles are very important. Titles guide what we understand. Now, if we're looking at this painting here, so it happens that this website allows us to zoom in a lot, you can see that there are details of the canvas texture that stand out. In some cases, this white here, we're seeing bleeding through. He has used, for part of the white, the canvas surface itself. So how does that affect? This is he's stingy on paint, or it's incomplete, or does it give something that you like? And I can't tell you what your answer will be there, but it's something that stands out when you look at it, especially up close. You start to notice things like that. And details like this are things that I recommend looking for, because understanding how the artist did something starts with seeing what they did. Notice that we have the white of these flowers or these flowers that are different from the white in this one here. And here the canvas texture is used, but with a little bit of red on top of it. So it's not a case of doing something all the time, but what you make of this effect. And if we're looking at the painting as a whole, where is your eye drawn? Is it drawn to the same place or to only one place? What stands out for you, especially when you're up close versus when you're further away? So back to the central question here, the thesis statement that reflects your conclusions about the work. So this is the kind of thing where after you've spent much of the time you'll spend looking at this, and remember you're supposed to spend at least an hour and a half in one sitting looking at the artwork. After you've made many observations, I would ask yourself what you think the meaning of this work is, or what the intended impact is. What's going on here? And that's probably not going to be, oh, this is a scene of autumn, or this is a sunset, or in the case of the Vincent van Gogh painting, oh, this is just almond blossom. You're probably going to look at it and say, okay, well, how does it make you feel? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is this promising? Is it inspiring? Is it beautiful? Does it make you feel happy? Something about that you will give as your own conclusion of what you think the meaning is here. And then you'll build the paper around that and probably build some of your following analyses on those details that you're seeing that create that meaning to you. Now, you are more than welcome to make an appointment with the Writing Center if you are having trouble organizing those thoughts. Many people will do a kind of brainstorming session to help formulate their thesis, but that's something that works best if you've already spent the time looking at the artwork. The rest of the details for this paper. So we have 100 to 1,500 words, so that's 4 to 6 double-spaced pages using our course paper template. And we're specifically supposed to start with an introductory paragraph with these details here. And from that, this is kind of introducing the work, and then it's time to start talking about what goes into this paper. Now, often people have no trouble with the introductory paragraph, and then they ask themselves, well, how do I organize the rest of the paper? And that's where you can go to one of those lists of different parameters for formal analysis, like looking at the principles or looking at the elements and using that as a starting place to talk, okay, here's how line is using this. Here's for the values. Here are the shapes that stand out. And it's not the be-all, end-all, but it's a way to start getting your thoughts down, and then you can start talking about how those different things work together. Now, if we're talking about, say, those 3D elements, if we go back to the Van Gogh painting, we see that there are places where he uses texture more so than others, where the actual height of the painting, the paint on the canvas, say, for example, this blossom here, you can tell if you look at this, and more so when you're zoomed out, you can see that there are certain elements where it's actually the layers of paint on top of each other are making it physically higher than those around. And that helps it stand out and contrast it with this where you can see that's the canvas as opposed to these layers built on top of it. And so it creates a sense of three-dimensionality because it is actually three-dimensionally different in a noticeable way. Same thing where we've got these splotches of blue building up this texture, these broad strokes of paint, and creates a sense of depth to this painting, which pulls you in, and that's the kind of thing that you might be writing about. Probably not about that painting because you'd have to go to the Netherlands to see it. But if you did see it at the Netherlands, yeah, I'm curious to see what other details you have identified. And so the instructions iterate a couple points. So you're not supposed to be, say, going to the library and pulling out art history books. No research is supposed to be used on this. But this is the kind of thing that it's supposed to be founded in what you see in front of you. And that could include, potentially, you go and look at it, and there's the information card that has the title of the work and perhaps a little brief blurb about it that shapes it. And that's what the gallery is giving you to guide it. The title, Almond Blossom, helps you see, okay, these aren't just random flowers, these are going to turn into almonds, and almonds then is now, or considered, nicer than some other nuts. Alright, so now if you're still looking for ways to organize, the instructor provides a list that you could follow. You could just take this and describe each element in order. This is not a binding list, but it is a way of breaking down your formal analysis. And so we see that we have, first impressions with large-scale things like focal points where your eye is drawn to a particular area. Are the lines strong, smooth, clear? Where are they stretching? Now, if we look at the calm out of Mediterranean port here, I'm going to zoom out here. You have some strong lines that are coming from these steps here. You've got contrasting lines like that, but overall most of the lines are pointing towards the horizon, towards that sunset, towards the point of departure where the ships are going. If the artist conveys space, what type of space is used? In this case, we've got the ocean in one, we've got the tree branches in the almond blossom painting. Composition, how are things ranged? Is it stable? Does it feel like things are moving? And that stable, unstable thing, that's not just, is it actively in motion, but is there perhaps something growing, changing that we see? Texture, Van Gogh is great, and Impressionist paintings as well, if we're talking about texture. Many contemporary paintings are as well, where there's a lot of feelings that come out of these sort of textures that are used in different parts of the painting. Light and dark. How big is it? This is especially something that you can only really appreciate in person. what kind of colors palette is being used. What kind of aesthetic? Is this naturalistic? Is it not? If we looked at, say, a lot of Picasso paintings, it's not very naturalistic. But does that change how you interpret things? And pose, subject, title. How does the title relate to the content? So here, this is coming in. And this is one of those things that a lot of people will discuss early because they might glance at the title before they really settle in to look at the work as a whole. If you look at the title afterwards, often people will sit down and look at the painting some more, which you can do. But where you discuss this will depend on when you look at the title versus spending those 98 minutes. Mood. And then this is a great one and this works easier if you are journaling your thoughts as you look at it. See, how has your impression changed over the course of looking at it? Do you understand it differently? Do you feel different things than when you went in? And a reminder that this assignment is supposed to include specifically a statement that you looked at it for at least 90 minutes following this form here. So I would just copy and paste this into your draft at the beginning and then fill in those details so that way you don't forget about it. So in terms of outlining this, you'll want to grab a copy of our course paper template and then start out with the introductory paragraph outlined here. Make sure at the end you have this sentence, so copy and paste and then fill it in, the details. And whether you're starting with a list from, say, the Kennedy Center website or starting with this list here, copy your list into your draft and start answering each of these questions briefly and then working those into paragraphs. You're probably going to combine some of these, like talking about space and composition. Those lend themselves well to being in one paragraph. You might also have the discussion of light and shadow and color together. So you can reorganize these. In fact, that's something that the instructions encourage, to say it's in no particular order. But you're looking at how do you organize these thoughts into paragraphs. So go by what makes the most logical sense to you, keeping in mind that because this is a 4 to 6 page paper, you're probably not going to have one large paragraph for each of those, just because that would take more pages than that. So organize according to what makes sense for you. Personally, I would take this, what is the subject, title, content, and because that is something that is discussed in the opening paragraph, I would have that content thing be part of my very brief description of the work here, and so I'd fold those together. So look for opportunities like that. If you don't have a copy of our APA course paper template, you can download that from this link here. And with that, we're going to wrap things up now. So if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu to sign up for a free appointment, and visit us at the Online Writing Center website for copies of our webinar videos and other resources.